If I were to feed the word hate into an AI algorithm and ask it to make a picture, first of all, I think that's a bad idea, that's how we got Am, and second, it would puke out a man in a yellow bodysuit and a red lightning bolt on his chest running at speeds far beyond the speed of light. What does he do with all of that power, you may ask? Well, he uses it for the sole purpose of making his nemesis' life into a living hell, traveling back in time to when his nemesis was a kid, pushing him off stairs, ruining his baseball games, erasing his best friend out of existence, and unaliving his mother and framing his father. If hate and pettiness ever had a different name, that name would be Reverse Flash. A villain so dastardly, so devious, he made me go back to my video about pure evil villains and made me realize this kind of villainy deserves a video all on its own. So today I want to talk about this particular type of characters that send a chill down your spine and a hardy on your pants whenever they appear on screen. Characters that leave in their wakes piles of bodies and forest fires. Characters that people would like to refer to nowadays as a menace. I just want to say that I love how old-timey words such as heinous, despicable, and diabolical are making a comeback in this day and age. It just has that nostalgic feeling with how these words were so prevalent in cartoons, which made me so happy that more and more people are using the word menace to describe the sickest threats to society, fictional or not. To start, let's pull up some definitions so that we won't have to bother with them later. So, what is a menace? Well, looking at Google's definition, it says that a menace, noun, is a person or thing that will likely cause harm. Now, this definition of a menace is definitely serviceable. However, it doesn't conform to the narrative I'm trying to spin here because if a menace is just someone or something that will likely cause harm, then doesn't that mean every villain out there is a menace? Since every villain can and will cause harm, except for those pansies who are for some reason pacifists, doesn't that qualify them to this category? It seems off, doesn't it? Let's take for example Captain Hook from Peter Pan. He is, by every definition, a pure evil villain. Disney evil to be exact. If we take that definition of a menace, he should be one, seeing that he has every burning intention to cause harm to the Neverland boys. Those eyes are that of someone thinking about committing filicide. But can you, with all honesty, tell me that Captain Hook is a menace? Now, of course, this is all subjective, and some people will call him a menace ironically, but it still feels wrong. So, what gives? Well, that's because I didn't fully show you guys the full meaning of what is a menace, just to add tension to the video, you know? So, to define it fully, a menace is someone or something that can cause harm, a threat, or danger. That last part is what makes or breaks a menace, the very first ingredient needed to successfully manufacture a menace. Now, Bornok, you may say, what is the difference between likely to cause harm and a threat? Aren't they the same? Semantics. They are totally different in my own dictator world inside my head. The difference is that likely to cause harm is a more passive term, meaning they can cause harm accidentally, or more importantly, they cause harm in the background of the story. Now, a threat in my own interpretation is active. Especially in regards to the story, someone or something that immediately creates tension as soon as they hit the scene, a looming matchstick that dangles above a floor filled with gasoline that at any moment could fall and start a fire. To go back to our example earlier, do we collectively all feel that Captain Hook is that kind of a character? Does anyone feel the immediate danger like that one scene in Hunter x Hunter as Meruem came down the stairs and aged a man like a Family Guy skit? To coin the term of today's generation, which hopefully withstands the test of time for the years to come, one way for a character to become a threat is for that character to have aura. Which I hope I don't have to explain to all of you what that is. Having aura ensures that a character can grab the attention of the audience and make sure they can't look away. But not all ways of farming aura can elevate said character into a menace. For example, if a character relies only on their drip like Gohan's dad here and then promptly gets his ass beaten in every fight, I can hardly call him a menace. Like, yes, Piccolo, we see the fit. Now, can you please save Goku from eating an energy blast from the actual menace of DBZ? Now, for a character to have legitimate aura, let's take a page from the industry of wrestling, where for a wrestler to get over with the fans, he needs to basically have two things: mean guns and an even meaner lip. Strength and charisma, if you will, and that's my Fallout reference for this video. They should be able to talk shit to their fictional circus partner and be able to back it up in the ring. It sounds simple, right? For a character to become a menace, he should be strong in eloquence. But again, that's not cutting it for me, because I know there are some villains out there who are pure brutes and are great talkers, but they don't carry any aura with them. Hardly can we call them a menace. So let's modify our previous parameter for strength, because being strong doesn't automatically mean you have power over the story. No, in order for one to be a menace, he should be able to win fights. Meaningful fights. And not by any means, mind you. He should be able to overpower his opponents easily with his one hand and shotgun a can of Budweiser with the other. In order for us to really feel the threat of the menace, they should, for the most part, win their battles without struggle. Or if there is struggle, they shouldn't show it. Now sure, you can hype up the character by saying he's won many battles, but in my opinion, that really isn't an effective way of making your character threatening. That's what I like to call satanizing their feats. Of course, in reference to Mr. Satan from Dragon Ball, whose feats of strength are all theatrics. What should be done is to show how much of an overwhelming force this character is. Now to drag the angry One Piece fans back to this video, let's have Arlong back to the ring, and let's use him as a punching bag again. We were told how much of a menace he is, how much destruction and how vile he was to the islands. He was one of the 7 warlords of the sea. We were also told how malicious he was towards Nami. In a sense, he was a menace. But in our encounters with him, especially with Luffy, he didn't feel that way. Why? Because he lost the only significant fight he was in. And for the life of me, I can't remember any other fights he was involved in other than with fodder villagers. If you ask any other sensible people, i.e. not the troglodyte One Piece superfans, who cannot for the life of them find any fault in the story and in their precious villains, Arlong's menace status goes down the drain the same way his face got caved in by Luffy. That's one of the main reasons why I have a problem with One Piece villains and why you should check out my rants on them. Winning significant fights is essential to be considered a threat. But what is more important is that the victory should be shown to us more so than told. Same goes for a villain's villainy. We cannot just be simply told that this guy shoots dogs. We need to actually hear the gunshots and see him grinning because of the atrocity he has committed. Now, anyone can do evil things in broad daylight. But in order for them to officially enter menace status, their evil doings must go over and beyond. And for our example of a heinous man committing heinous acts, I want to dip back into the realm of violent Cirque du Soleil and talk about my favorite villain in wrestling. You might be confused now, as Randall Keith Orton over here is a much beloved babyface at the time of this recording, someone you put in front of the French and they all collectively hear voices in their heads. But for those who didn't catch his deviant years, or those who don't watch wrestling at all, at one point in time, he was the most heinous villain in all of WWE. Sure, he had bouts of the voices back when he was the legend killer, sending old men and women to meet God, and even when he had the apex killer phase siding with the government, none of that came close to when 2007 rolled around and he became a full-blown menace. After his exile from Evolution, a group that gave the twinkle in his name, Randall the Scandal made some trouble backstage. Truancy, tardiness, violations, all of that he did with nothing more than "Hey, nothing you can say" as a response. After a slow character development, however, Randy changed the way he moved in the ring. From fast and explosive to a more methodical approach, from cocky to cold and conniving, from babyface Hollywood model to a skinhead psychopath. From legend killer, Randy slipped into a more fitting gimmick, calling himself the Viper. He stalks his prey, ambushes them when they're none the wiser, and slithers away with every championship match. But that wasn't what made him a menace. Any villain can do these tactics, but Randall the Mental had to take it to a whole different level. See, if there is one thing in a wrestler's arsenal that should make an impact, that's their finisher. And Randy already had a terrific one, the RKO, which is, to me, the best finisher in wrestling history. But Randy didn't like to just KO his opponent. No. Randy wanted to send them straight to Valhalla. So the snake grew legs, and the voices in his head said that skulls are the same as soccer balls. Thus, the punt was created. Less of a wrestling move and more of a war crime. Literally, no one has ever kicked out of this move, and when the end screen pops up after you get your head kicked clean off your shoulders, that's at least a month's vacation. And with this evil device, Randy started torturing his victims. But not only directly, no. When he was feuding with John Cena back in '07, the man dragged John Cena's dad from the audience and played FIFA with the 50-year-old's cranium. Another instance of this maliciousness was when Randy cuffed John to the ring ropes, forcing him to watch as he proceeded to beat his dad up again. This probably gave Orton so much gratification he did it again in 2009, his heyday when he terrorized the McMahon family leading up to his big fight with Big Papa H. And when I say terrorize, I mean it. Vince, his boss, got written off TV again by the great neutralizer that is Randy's boots. Shane, here comes the money, McMahon, returned to just get jumped and punted. And Stephanie, in spite of the brutality Randy unleashed to both her father and brother, still got the worst punishment as payback for slapping Randy in a backstage promo. When her husband, the cerebral assassin, was in trouble, handcuffed to the ring ropes, Randall Kink Orton taunted the brain ninja with fist and a sledgehammer, and with mic in hand, he said to three H's that there was only one person that could save him. That's when Stephanie ran down to the squared circle, only to be met by vintage Randy Orton and sex offender Randy Orton, all in front of the helpless Triple H. Following that, he continued his evil spree, going hot potato with John Cena, exploding the man and adding terrorism to his list of crimes. After that, the voice of Durag Vince spoke in his head as he proceeded to violate Kofi Kingston to end his legendary year. No one came close to the heat he was getting at that time. He was a slimy, cheating scum that actually has the talent to back it up. He was a villain. Yet on his waist were only victories and gold, because he didn't just win his battles, he put his opponents out of commission, battered and broken. Randy at his prime was no ordinary villain, and the way he achieved his menace status is something most villains lack: petty, personal malice that directly affects the heroes. So that's one way of achieving aura, to win in either disgusting or brutal fashion with a smile on your face. How about the second parameter? The promos, the smack talk, the monologues. How does one create dialogue so vile it makes you a menace? Of course, for a character to have a threatening personality, what they are saying comes into play. Intimidation, viciousness, vitriol, badassery, all of those are important in amping the aura of their words, but for maximum efficiency, it all comes down to one thing in particular, the most important ingredient to creating a menace's voice lines: the disrespect. Let's take for example from anime's most disrespectful moments that live rent-free in my head. Of course I have to mention Daddy Uchiha because brother, everything he says is disrespectful. And it helps highlight an essential component of effective trash talk. There are many examples we can draw from him, but one of his most iconic pieces of dialogue was when he was up against the 5 Hokages, the 5 ninja presidents. He commented on how unfair it was to fight them 5 against 1. So what does he do? He made 25 wood clones, 5 for each of his opponents, and then proceeded to ask them if they wanted to see them in Gundam mech suits or not. Absolute disrespect. What made this smack talk so effective is the caliber of his opponents, because we know that his opponents were the best of the best, the toughest there is, yet still he treated them like absolute noobs in this sick little game he was playing. Trash talking someone we know cannot hold a candle to you is one thing, but doing that to established high-ranking opponents is another. To get back into the good side of the One Piece fans, there is one line from a character that cemented their menace status and helps me to highlight that dialogue is not the only way to convey how menacing and intimidating they are. It also needs the presentation. Mihawk is definitely one of my favorite characters in One Piece. This vampire-looking Spanish conquistador-looking hunk of deviancy was a threat the minute he debuted on his little dingy coffin ship, chasing down pirates for fun and cutting down their ships with his greatsword. From the drip of this man, he was Tier 1 Grade A Prime Menace. And from what we learned from Zoro, this man was the best there is when it comes to swordsmanship. Now, at this point in the story, Zoro was another Tier 1 Grade A Prime Badass, a no-nonsense fighter who was second to only Luffy. I mean, this man wields 3 freaking swords, 2 with his hands and 1 on his mouth. At this point, we know no one better than him when it comes to cutting down foes. So when he challenged Mihawk to gauge his level against his, we all thought that he would somehow put up a decent fight. But that wasn't really the case. Zoro unsheathed his weapons, preparing for all-out war. And in response, Mihawk pulled out a butter knife, saying that he doesn't have any other smaller blade. What followed was the most humiliating moment of Zoro's sword fighting career, being outclassed by this menace. In trash talking, words are essential, yes, but one must not forget that presentation and flash is part of that dance. The imagery of Zoro using his entire arsenal of weapons against Mihawk's blatant disregard is what made him a menace. Imagine now if he had used his black blade from the start. Yes, he would have demolished Zoro all the same, but that would just have made him another run-of-the-mill threat. Another great example of a character showing not telling that they are a menace was when Kurapika brought a shovel to a fight against one of the physically strongest villains in the Hunter x Hunter series, to show how much confidence he has that after the fight, he will be burying his opponents. And that brings me to another point I wanted to make about menaces, something that I realized when I made the Captain Hook analogy. Menaces aren't strictly villains. Sure, it is easier to make a villain or an antagonist a menace due to them having more freedom to wreak havoc in a given story, but that doesn't mean protagonists can't be menaces, because I realized that Captain Hook wasn't the menace of Peter Pan, but rather it was Peter Pan himself. The way he terrorized the poor old captain, leaving him as crock food and constantly making his life a living hell, Peter Pan is a menace material. And looking at some other heroes, they are more of a threat, more disrespectful and pettier than other villains. And this brought me to the conclusion that my definition of a menace is basically the chaotic side of the alignment chart. That whatever their goal may be along the way, there will be catastrophe. That is what a menace is most of the time. Disrespectful, powerful, a threat. And maybe through other videos we will look at these menaces more in depth, as I have put off writing this video for too long and I feel like I've yapped enough. So if you like this video, do hit that like and subscribe, and watch out for more content coming your way. I promise I will be posting more regularly, so yeah.